Welcome to the show today. Today I have Bart Suichies on the show, and he is the head of digital and software at SICPA. And I'm very, very excited to talk to you today and hear your story and dive a little bit more into what's driving, what gets you out of bed every morning. So welcome to the show, Bart.
Thanks, Daniel. Very nice to be here.
So let's maybe dive right into your story and start there. Can you talk a little bit about maybe one or also some of the defining moments that you feel really shaped you as a human being, shaped you as a leader along the way?
Sure. So a little bit about my background, maybe. I'm not Swiss originally. I moved here about 18 months ago, and I think from that was a defining moment. I would say in recent history. I've always been a big fan of the mountains, and being from the Netherlands originally, it's pretty flat there. So once I got the opportunity to go here, I think that was a pretty easy decision. However, I had a family. My wife had to leave her job. So there's a lot of things that go into a decision like that, and I think it's one of these things that it's easy to talk about, but once the moment is there and you have to make the decision, it's a pretty big one. And I think it was the culmination of a lot of things that sort of drove the decision um, to go here. So that was the recent history. I think I'm a generation that didn't grow up with mobile and things like that, but I distinctly remember having the first computer, the first very simple programming things, and sort of the ability to shape a world. I think that was also quite impactful. And in between those, I think, so like I said, I have a great love for the mountains. So I love to do powder skiing, things like that. And one of the things I always like, which are, I would say, defining moments over and over again, is when you're in the mountains and you're alone. You have great freedom, you have great responsibility, and you need to make a lot of decisions. Where do you go? How to be safe? Things like that. And I think that the combination of those three, I think, shaped me to who I am today.
Some powerful ones. Definitely also the relocation piece, which is, as you said, easy to talk about, but then when the moment comes, there's a lot of emotional decisions that need to be made.
Yes.
Talking about people, are there some people that you feel really shaped you along the way, or some groups of people, or maybe specific ones that you feel really, really had an impact on you?
You got a minute? No, I think there's a lot, and I would say the obvious one is family, parents, immediate people around you that give you the confidence to make such decisions, and say, okay, whatever happens, we have the support, we have each other, which I think is hugely important to have sort of a baseline of trust. Professionally, I would say I had a stint working in a computer game development studio, which helped shape me, because that really showed how you lead highly creative teams, large teams of very, very different people, but all extremely creative. Get them to align with the goal to ultimately, after 2 years, deliver a silver disc, which people put in their PlayStation. And on a more personal level, I would say there's a close friend of mine who was the first, after I got out of a stint of a number of startups that I've been in, asked me to work for a corporate. And my first question was, okay, do I need to wear a suit? Because if that's the case, I'm not going. But we had a nice conversation, and ultimately one thing led to another, and we had a great time, and it really showed me the other side of the world that until then was I looked from the outside in, and it's easy to have an opinion. Uh, uh, they have so much money, but they're wasting it. They're slow, and this really gave me an insight into to a different world. And I think that's I'm still grateful that he managed to convince me, because I wouldn't be here if he hadn't.
This is an interesting one about corporate and about sort of like setting your standards, I guess, and saying, well, if this is the case, I'm not going to come, but we can talk about it. This is so it leads me a bit in the present moment that I want to talk about with you as well, in terms of where you are today and also why you joined that industry that you're in right now. Was it by coincidence? Was it by design, or what got you pulled into this?
I would say a little bit of both, probably. So I just came off a stint working for Philips, and one of the things we did there was work on concepts for blockchain, which was a new technology at the time. So this was, I think, 3 years ago, something like that. Um, and I was there as a contractor, and the contract expired, and we had done everything, and it was pretty nice. But I recognized that sort of there are things in technology happening today that will probably play out over a longer cycle. So 5 years, 10 years, maybe even longer. And I did not want to restart every 2 years and sort of go through the motions, do the beginning, and then after 2 years you move on and you start over again. So I basically started looking for a place where I could do this for a longer time, build a team, and sort of help shape this development. And sort of by chance, one day at LinkedIn, I saw this role, and I started reading it, and it was like, hey, this is exactly what I've done at in my previous work. However, it's in an industry that I know nothing about. Plus, it's in Lausanne, so it's right next door to all these beautiful mountains that I love. So it started out as somewhat of a joke. Say, hey, let's call, let's see where this goes. And then over time, it got more serious, and now I'm here, which is it's kind of fascinating because I still learn a lot every day about our industry. It's a very, very, I would say, typical industry. At the same time, it has a lot of the similar problems that I know and understand. So it's a little bit of both.
So talk to me a bit more about that. Talk to me a bit more about what is that industry specifically, and why do you think there's some mountains to move in this industry?
Yeah. So the SICPA is really, I would say, a world leader in the security of value documents, so passports, things like that, and banknotes. We basically secure the world's banknotes. And that, I think, puts us squarely in the heart of society. A lot of the things that we secure, they lead to us living our lives, and we don't even think about it. When we purchase something and we use the banknote, there is this amount of trust, and I find that extremely fascinating because of the impact it has if you get it wrong. And I think there are a couple of examples of nation states getting it wrong. And so I think that from that perspective, everybody has an opinion. Everybody, because society is so versatile and there's so many stakeholders. Yet coming back to this common thread, identity, currency, governance, these types of things, and seeing a lot of changes there. I mean, if you look at the technology world, if you look at the new governance models, the new operating models coming through technologies like blockchain, but also just mobile and social, the things that we already know a little bit better. I think we have a great challenge of bringing that into sort of the governmental space. And I think that governments and central banks, who are typically our clients, They are usually sort of out of the picture because they're not so sexy. It's not Google, it's not Microsoft, it's not B2C, but they have a tremendous impact in how these things will play out. Whether you like it or not, I don't think governments will go away anytime soon. Some of the more, I would say, anarchistic movements in the blockchain space, they think they can do without. I think just looking at the world, that's not realistic to think. So I would rather help them, because in a lot of cases they also recognize there's a lot of disruption coming, but they have a great responsibility in making sure society functions. So this is, I think, also why things are going slower than normal, because the mantra of move fast, break things typically doesn't work for a government. But it's interesting to see and to see if we can get them to a place where they cannot go alone, and try to push the boundaries a little bit, and help them use these technologies, because there's some great things happening right now, and I think that if we manage to get them to adopt that, but in a way that everybody's comfortable with, that is properly governed, that there's control mechanisms in place, I think everybody will benefit of it.
So it's a lot about societal impact, really, at the core,
Yes.
when it comes to moving the mountains and using technology and using sort of like the methods and the control mechanisms and the governmental space that we have right now. It's really about the societal impact at the end of the day, and being able to do this together with, the tech community, with the political community, with the, existing established community of, the financial industry, for example. And this is really powerful, very, very powerful, because usually also, in banking and in finance, I think it's not enough talked about the impact. It's more about, the means to an end and the tools and things like that. But few people really talk about the actual mountains that can be moved, because there's quite some big mountains we can move in that space. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Other thing I want to dive into is some of the lessons that you learned along the way, because you had some interesting experiences and some stories to tell, for sure. So I'm curious, like, what is one of the most important lessons that you learned along the way, and what's the context around that lesson?
So I learn every day. Some big lessons, some small lessons. So I would say I have a number. To me, one of the important things is, and also what I learned when starting work here, is that people often don't even begin to understand the real problems. So it takes time, it takes effort to say, let's dive into this, and let's be open to learn to this. Because if you don't do that, you do not get to the level of detail that is required. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, talk about digital identity, or talk about Bitcoin, or talk about any of these things. The concepts are usually pretty easy to understand. A little bit like poker. It's very easy to understand, but very hard to master. And I think that these details, they matter, and they matter because you need to make them your own in order to understand that everything you do, it can fail for the most stupid reason. People not liking you, people having a different incentive than you have. And then you stand there and say, but look, this is the best idea ever. And people still don't adopt that. And if you cannot cross that chasm, I would say, and usually crossing that chasm has nothing to do with the actual problem, but with all the things that come around it. You will go nowhere. So you will be the guy or girl that has all these great ideas, and they will never get it up. I think that's one of the big lessons I learned, is that sure, you can be wise, you can understand the vision, you can formulate the vision. If you cannot formulate how you're going to get there and get the people aligned behind that, you will never go anywhere. you will just have dreams. And I think that's to me also what I like about working in my current company is that it's very real, it's very practical. At times it's very frustrating because you think, okay, why am I doing this? This has nothing to do with what I would like to do, but it's part of the job. It's you need to do it. There's no shortcut, unfortunately.
That's very powerful, talking about turning sort of like dreams or visions into actual reality with the bridge in between is very powerful because you can rally people around sort of like a big picture. But if they don't know what they can do about it, there's not much going to happen. This is very powerful, like drilling it down into something concrete. And it doesn't mean we have to have 16-year roadmaps or something like that.
No.
I think it's more about the actual concrete next step.
I think it's very much about so the world I live in sometimes has these 16-year roadmaps, but I think that the important thing here is the ability to build momentum, and I think that is a skill. I wish I was better at it every day, because it's the skill I basically use most. Try to get to momentum, and because once you have the momentum, everything becomes easier. But getting there is that's the work.
That's a very powerful one. Building momentum basically as a skill or as a focus, because you can have the vision or you can have on the other side the detailed action plan, but if momentum doesn't happen in that initial phase or things don't start moving, if the snowball doesn't start moving down the mountain, nothing's ever going to happen. So momentum is absolutely key in anything that needs to roll and needs to roll big. So this is a big one, very big one. Thanks for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit more about leadership and quite a few different areas. One is about bringing the right people on board. So how do you make sure you bring the right people on board?
Good question. What I try to do is to hire people that are like me. I think that's it's a natural tendency to have to sort of reflect on yourself and this person gets it. It's totally, we're on the same line. But I think it helps to hire people that basically can get you to a place where you cannot go alone. So they need to bring something new to the table. The one thing there are two things that I look at generally. One is looking at their path, their career path. I have a pretty non-standard career path. But if you're able to formulate sort of how that works and why people make the steps, I think their story tells a lot. And the second one is a character trait, which is they need to be adventurers. A lot of the work that we do is make scenarios for the next generation technology, figure out what the new problems are, and figure out how we can solve those. Because that's important for our business to create a sustainable competitive advantage. But also it helps us understand in the road how are we going to get there? How is this going to play out? And people's eyes need to light up when you say that. And currently we have a great example of we're hiring a bunch of engineers, and not everybody has that. So some of them go like, okay, but just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they are probably great at what they do. But in our specific case, we need people to basically challenge everything up to the point where it's really annoying. So I think we should do this. Because those are the people that will, I think, push the needle and get you to this place where you're uncomfortable, but then say, okay, let's try to make it real, and then you move forward. And I think that to me is a critical skill. They need to have some adventure in them and say, okay, I don't mind if I don't know where I'll end up, but we're going to have fun in doing it.
That's a really powerful one. You know, the adventure in there. I guess it also goes very closely related to your mountain thing, your passion for mountains and exploration and, you know, fun stuff. This is really powerful because, you know, you can have a skill of getting a task done, but today more than ever before, and I'm going to be very blunt here, this is more a commodity than anything else. And what is not a commodity is moving the needle, is going past that, is coming up with new ways that have never been thought of and challenging the status quo, challenging things. And many times it's very uncomfortable, you know, and it creates weird situations. But and I think that's why it's so important, and that's why it's also so valuable.
And I think adding to that, I think that it's fine to challenge the status quo. I think one of the key things to take into account, as probably in any market it's true, in any organization, is that yes, you can challenge the status quo, but you need to do it with a certain level of respect. So, I mean, the company I work for, it's 90 years old. They've done many great things. I mean, like I said, we're a global leader in some of the areas that we work in. I can come in and say, look, guys, everything is wrong, and we need to go full digital, and you don't understand. That doesn't get me anywhere. Having respect for the people that have done the work, extending a hand to them, but at the same time trying to push them a little bit. But I mean, up to it doesn't matter whether it's a chemist, it's a developer. I think that the big mistake you can make is go in, don't show respect, and say, look, I know what to do. Let's all go there. And this is also, I think, a sure way to failure, which in people's ambition, you sometimes need to take a step back and say, look, yes, we may not go as fast as we would like, but it's important to have the people on board with this, because that will help you along the way.
Challenging the status quo with respect. That's what stuck with me. That's an important one, you know, having that balance between, on the one side, you want to challenge things, but you also got to make sure that you don't disrespect people, really disrespect accomplishments and disrespect what's already there. That's a big one. I think respect is the right word, or the right way of saying this. So now you're getting those people on board. Now you have them on board, or you have an existing team. So how do you make sure people work together well, especially in cross-functional teams?
So this, I would say, is, for me, comes pretty natural. Having been an entrepreneur, having worked a lot with different types of partners. So I don't care too much about the functions. I care about making the thing go. So what I try to do, and hopefully improve every day, is try to rally people behind a vision and make them understand not only their own role in this journey, but also how they can help each other. So to give you an example, if one of the things that we want to do is sort of imagineer the future, so build a lot of prototypes that are future forward, I need a concept developer to come up with very interesting story, but this person needs to work together with our engineering department, which also needs to work with our data privacy officers, for instance, to make sure that everything we do, we don't make people very uncomfortable. And at the same time, I try to address people on their role, but also ask them to sort of do it in reverse and say, so how can we make this faster? How can you contribute to our success? And I think that this is also it's our success, always. It's never me or some other person that is saving the company or bringing the next billion or things like that. I think it's very important to make it a team effort. And it's very much like a sports team. Yeah, you have people that make the goals, but if they are not fed the balls from the sideline, you go nowhere. And I think it's important for everybody to realize what their role is, but share this same vision. That makes it much easier.
This is an interesting one, about the team, comparing it to football and understanding different roles and understanding, yes, there's people basically making the goals, but they by themselves only on the court or only on the field, well, they wouldn't be making any goals. So they only make goals because everything works together really well. And this is a very powerful, I think, comparison. Now, another one that I have is going more into management, I guess. So there's always this fine line, especially in today's organizations, where things become more autonomous and sort of like self-organizing and things like that. So you have goals that you want to accomplish at one point, right? And at the other hand, you don't want to micromanage people. So how do you sort of like strike the balance of making sure that goals, priorities, whatever you call them, are actually reached, or there's massive progress towards them, without always standing behind people or looking after their shoulders?
So the way I try to see it is almost try to reverse the org chart. So if you have a team, my role is making sure the team functions, nothing more. So whatever I can do to help take away barriers, red tape, anything, this is my job, whether I like it or not. So that already takes away a good chunk of my time to micromanage, which is good. So that's sort of a self-protection. But I would say more importantly, it's a little bit about incentives that you set. And what I've learned from my days working in gaming is if you enter a new adventure game or something like that, or mobile or whatever, there are these structures you can use to get people hooked. So basically, you level up very quickly in the beginning to get the sense of accomplishment, but also to learn skills that you need. So what I try to do is mimic that in the real world and say, okay, look, in the first few months, we try to level up new hires quickly to get them comfortable with what they need to do. And then we let them go because they will be masters of their domain. So I try to give them as much responsibility as they can as soon as possible, but guide them through the first few weeks or months to make sure that they are not drowning or do not have the right support structure to function. And I think that to me is also it makes my objective a little bit different, saying I don't care too much about the tasks. I care about that we are aligned, and I care about that people are put in a position so they do their best work. I think this is the most important one, and I hope they surprise me. I hope they do things that I would have never thought possible. That's ultimately, I think, also a big task of leaders today is make the leaders of tomorrow, and hopefully sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of things they bring to the table, I would say generation-wise, that we could learn a lot from, but also vice versa. So I think trying to manage that path is also the way to achieve some key goals without micromanaging on specific tasks.
I love the comparison to the computer game because, I used to be a very big gamer, now a little less, but I love the comparison there very much because when it comes to leveling up, I see this like twofold. Leveling up meaning the growth of the company, the growth of like goals and accomplishments, and also leveling up yourself. So you grow on the process as things grow, you grow as well. I see this sort of like a twofold game, and that is very powerful because sometimes in environments that are very much just on growth and KPIs focused, the people go sort of like forgotten in the process that it's about growing the people as well. So this is a very interesting comparison. So it protects almost like from forgetting the level up of the people as well. This is
and I think also from that point of view, we have this inherent bias in life about what people can do, and interestingly enough, if you look at gaming, if you look at some of these massive multiplayer games, for instance, recently there was a battle. I don't know I forgot the game, but the interesting thing is that in terms of real money, there were hundreds of thousands of Swiss francs being shot to pieces in virtual space. And the leaders of these charges are 15, 16-year-old kids, which have an extreme strategic ability. They know how to communicate, but because it is digital or virtual, you see it. There's this much more merit-based, skill-based approach to things. And I think if we can bring a little bit from that into an organization, I think it could be quite liberating, to say the least.
Especially because of the bias isn't there. The bias isn't there, oh, you're the kid. The bias is there, oh, you look like this. The bias is there, oh, you're this type of person, you're whatever. Because, well, it's all an avatar. At the end of the day, everyone's just an avatar, and they get to design themselves in whatever shape or form they want to. And so there's literally no bias there. This is very powerful. Yes, coming back to the metaphor of the game in a corporation, I really like this one. So last question I have is a bit more in the clouds or in the future, so to say. It's the rocking chair question. So let's put ourselves in a little bit in the future. So let's say you're 80 years old in your rocking chair, and life's good, and you're sort of like looking out from your terrace or veranda or whatever. And what is the impact that you wish you would have had on the world at that point?
So the very simple one is I would like to take care of my children and sort of the next generation. And like I said, I think there's a lot of very interesting things happening in technology now, but technology can be used for good and for less good things. And I've had many discussions with many people with great glasses of wine on sort of, okay, what's the moral of technology or progress? And I don't know if there is one, but what I would like to contribute is that if we use these powerful new technologies, we use them for the good of society, to make society function better, which is very hard because I'm not just talking about Western rich societies, but I'm also talking about Asia, Middle East, all these things, Africa, which have their unique set of challenges, where you don't want to come in with the moral high ground of, look, we're Western, we will show you how it's done. Again, coming back to the respect. But doing it in such a way that society, my children, will benefit. I would love for them to have the best digital identity solution there is, which preserves the privacy, but also which makes it very easy to interact with the government to do all the things that they need to do when they're adults. And when I think about my kids, I think about society at large, and I think that if I can contribute a little bit, because this is a massive amount of work, many people are active in this field and many play very vital roles. If I can play a little part in that, I would be happy. Depending on the view, if I still have the view on the mountains as well, I think that would be greatly helpful.
That's a very, very powerful one, looking at the next generation and sort of like projecting that out into society as a whole. Because at the end of the day, what we want most for the ones that we love the most. And if we can project that energy on society, that is very, very powerful. So thank you so much for sharing that, also going from all the practical pieces to the very visionary pieces, and everything in between, I would say. Really appreciate that. So I'm going to link below this video to some of the sources, like your social media profile, to the company page as well, so people can keep in touch and follow some of the cool things you guys are up to, some of the interesting things you're doing, some of the opportunities that come up, and of course also connect with you. So Bart, thank you so much for being on the show.
No problem, Daniel. Very much a pleasure.